Okay, welcome back to my video. This is Biology Form 4, Chapter 12, another subtopic 12.4, Voluntary and Involuntary Action. So previous video, we have learned the neurons and also synapse. Today, we will learn what is voluntary and involuntary actions. So responses produced are either voluntary action or involuntary action. Okay, what are the pathways of information transmission involved in both action, and what are the differences between voluntary and involuntary action? These are comparison between voluntary action and involuntary action. The similarity between both actions involve stimulation, impulse, neuron, and effector organ. The differences, okay, for voluntary action, actions that we are conscious of and done on our own will. Okay, kita sedar dan kita sendiri yang on our own will. Okay, manakala involuntary action that occur automatically and occurs without us being conscious. Tanpa kita sedar dia berlaku. Okay, voluntary action involves the somatic nervous system. Involuntary action involves the autonomous nervous system. Voluntary action controlled by the cerebral cortex, and involuntary action controlled by the medulla oblongata and the hypothalamus. Voluntary action involves the reaction of the skeletal muscle. Involuntary action involves the reactions of the smooth muscle and also glands. So voluntary actions involving skeletal muscles, okay? Voluntary actions such as walking, talking, brushing your teeth are conscious action. Okay, for example, you can voluntarily raise your hand to answer a question. Okay, a voluntary action involving the skeletal muscle are controlled by the cerebral cortex. Since the information reaches the cerebral cortex, that is, our level of consciousness, our perceptions of the surrounding can be produced. So this figure 12.10 is the information pathway in voluntary action demo. So for example, when a teacher asks a question, okay, so number one, stimulus occur when the teacher questions a pupils. Okay, the pupil's receptor will receive the stimulus and transmit the nerve impulse to the cerebrum through sensory neuron. So here, sensory neuron carry the impulse, it sent to cerebrum. So here, the cerebrum will interpret the nerve impulse and then send to effector. Okay, to be sent to the effector, and the nerve impulse carried by the motor neuron, okay, to the effector. So the effector here, in this case skeletal muscle, will receive the information, and the pupil raises his or her hand to answer the question, and this is the response. Okay, so from stimulus until response. Alright, involuntary actions involving skeletal muscle, reflex response ataupun tindakan refleks. Kita ada yang pertama ini, 3 neuron reflex arc. Okay, several situations require immediate and spontaneous action. For example, if you accidentally prick your finger on a sharp pin, you will move your finger immediately without much thought. Okay, kalau fikir lagi lama-lama, nanti what happened to our finger? So ini yang dipanggil sebagai reflex action. Okay, a reflex action is a fast response, a stimulus without being controlled by the brain. The nerve pathway involved in a reflex action is called as the reflex arc. Okay, the reflex action of moving the finger from sharp pin involve 3 neurons and communication between the neurons in the peripheral nervous system and also the spinal cord. So these are the reflex arc that involves 3 neurons and a spinal cord. For example, here, when a finger is pricked by a sharp pin, the sensory receptor detects the stimulus and trigger a nerve impulse. Okay, now the nerve impulse is transmitted along the sensory neuron, here yang warna hijau ini, sensory neuron, to the spinal cord here. Okay, so dia hantar through the sensory neuron, hantar kepada spinal cord. So in the spinal cord, the nerve impulse is transferred from the sensory neuron to the synapse to the relay neuron. So relay neuron yang ini, yang warna orange ini. Okay, relay neuron. So from the relay neuron, the nerve impulse is transferred to the motor neuron. So ini motor neuron yang warna, what is this? Warna purple ini. Okay, dihantar. So the motor neuron, okay, motor neuron transfer the nerve impulse from the spinal cord to the effector. Okay, effector. Di sini effector kita adalah muscle tissue. So muscle tissue so that the finger can be moved quickly. Finger will be moved quickly. So ini ialah dia punya demonstration lah. Bagaimana dia berlaku. For example, when our finger is pricked by a sharp pin. The importance of reflex action. Reflex action produce spontaneous responses without waiting for instruction from the brain. The additional time that is needed by the brain to analyze information before triggering a response can lead to serious injuries. Since reflex action involves the spinal cord, the brain can focus on higher level thinking. So yang tadi itu adalah 3 neuron reflex arc. So yang ini adalah 2 neuron reflex arc. Okay, another reflex action is the knee jerk ataupun patellar reflex. This reflex uses the nerve pathway that only involves 2 neurons. Okay, that is the sensory neuron and also the motor neuron. 2 neurons involved. Okay, the doctor sometimes test the effectiveness of someone's nerve system by tapping on the knee using a rubber hammer. So this one, photograph 12.3, doctor testing knee jerk reflex. So number 1 here, when the tendon below the kneecap is knocked, the quadricep muscle here, the quadricep muscle stretches and stimulates the stretch receptor to trigger nerve impulses. And then the sensory neuron transmits the nerve impulses to the motor neuron in the spinal cord. Okay. The motor neuron then transmit impulses from the spinal cord back to the quadricep muscle. So now the quadricep muscle contracts, causing the leg to jerk to the front. So here, what is the result? Our leg will jerk forward. Okay, so sini nombor 1, this one, the tendon below our kneecap is knocked. Okay, what happened? Quadricep muscle stretch, because they stimulate the stretch receptor to trigger nerve impulses. Kemudian sensory neuron transmit the nerve impulses to the motor neuron in the spinal cord. Okay, spinal cord here. And then the motor neuron transmit again the impulses from the spinal cord to the quadricep muscle. So now the quadricep muscle will contract, causing the leg to jerk in front ataupun jerk forward. So ini yang dipanggil sebagai knee jerk reflex. Okay, so ini untuk yang 2 neuron dengan yang 3 neuron involved. Alright, so that's all for today. We will continue in the next video. Thank you.